Welcome back to the arena. I'm Michael Corrin. Now, a young woman denied a job because she's a Christian and attended an evangelical university. Whatever your religion, whatever your views, however you just reacted, it doesn't matter if you don't even like Christians very much. We believe in equality in this country. The story seems quite incredible. John Carpe is a lawyer who specializes in free speech and liberty of conscience issues. Everyone's conscience, by the way. I know that to be the case. He joins us now from Calgary. John, this woman is evangelical. She went to Trinity Western, and that's directly relevant here because Trinity Western is quite well known, some would say famous, some even infamous, because of its views on same-sex marriage, its views on marriage. Its students have to refrain from sexual activities unless they're married, and they don't recognize same-sex marriage. So it got into a bit of trouble over that. She believes in those points of view, and she was refused a job by a company who then went on to insult her and use foul language. Have I got it about right?
That's basically it. I haven't had a chance to look at all the email correspondence, but it'll be interesting to see if the company only added its comments against her as an afterthought, or if they actually mentioned it as a reason for not hiring her. The company's now saying that they were just merely sharing their religious philosophical views, but really the only reason she was not hired was that she lacked merit, which is kind of what any employer would say, and we'll see if it's true in this case.
Yeah. Look, I've seen the girl interviewed. I mean, with all due respect, she may not be the most qualified candidate. I don't know. But this is Amarik Wilderness Corporation, Scandinavian-based, and the more we've looked into them, they seem to be a sort of a group based around maybe Viking pagan ideology. There could be quite a strong gay culture involved. That's entirely up to them. It's their business. But they said she was underqualified. But then we're going to show some of the correspondence here. Let's see some of the things that they wrote to her, because it's really quite extraordinary. So most of us actually see Christianity as having destroyed our culture, tradition, and way of life. Okay, if that's what you believe. They went on to say, in closing, God bless, she said God bless to them, is very offensive to me and yet another sign of your attempts to impose your religious views on me. I do not want to be blessed by some guy who was conceived by a whore, that's what I said, outside of marriage, and whom has been the very reason for the most horrendous abuses and human rights violations in the history of the human race. And this is also what he said. If I was to meet the guy, I'd actually F him. Now, this is obscene, repugnant. They're obviously morons. They have a right to say that. Here's the real issue, though, and I want people to think about this rather than react. Just as Trinity Western, I believe, have a right to say, we don't believe in same-sex marriage, we will not acknowledge it, and still be allowed to exist and operate, does this company have a right to say to someone, we have a strong gay culture here, we have many gay people working here, we have many gay clients, we don't want you to work here? Do they have a right to say that, John?
Under the Constitution, under freedom of association, yes, they do. Under human rights legislation, no, they don't. And this is a conflict. We're going to keep on having these discussions, and maybe it's not a bad thing, but there's a fundamental contradiction between the Constitution, which in Charter Section 2D says freedom of association, which includes freedom not to associate, which on its face means you can refuse to hire somebody for whatever reason you want. Then we have human rights legislation, which is antithetical or contradictory or not compatible with full-fledged freedom of association. Mm-hmm. And human rights legislation says you cannot refuse to hire somebody because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, creed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, most Canadians support both. People like the idea of freedom of association and freedom not to associate, and people will nod and smile and say yes. And then you talk about human rights and a right to be free from discrimination, and most people will say yes. And so this is the state of the law. You've got a constitutional right that is in direct conflict with the anti-discrimination legislation, because you cannot believe in full freedom of association and a full right to be free from discrimination. They are opposites, and you cannot have both.
Exactly. There are numerous internal inherent contradictions here. And I know there are many people who want me to say, she's totally in the right, they're totally in the wrong, Trinity Western's completely in the right. There has to be some balance and consistency. I honestly believe that if a Christian company, if it's an evangelical or conservative Catholic employer, and many of the people who work there are of the same religion and belief system, if they say to a gay person, look, you won't feel comfortable here. They won't feel comfortable with you. It wouldn't be appropriate if you work here. I believe they have that right, but equally, I have to say to an employer in this case, if they have a strong gay culture, if they do not like Christian teaching, particularly Christian teaching on marriage, they also have a right to say, you wouldn't feel comfortable here. And we have to be grown up about this. Their insults to her, their abuse, their foul language, all of that is absolutely beyond the pale. They're obviously cretinous and unpleasant and bullies and utter bores. But I'm not sure how we resolve this. Do they have a right to say to her, you wouldn't fit? Look, if she was leading a tour, and let's say, and I think it's true, that quite a lot of their clientele will be gay. Let's say a couple of gay people were holding hands, and maybe they just kissed each other as they were. Would she feel comfortable? Would she make those people feel comfortable? There are some clashes here.
Well, there could well be. So the human rights law would say that the employer could refuse if it's a bona fide occupational requirement, meaning if it's an actual requirement of the job that you be very gay-friendly in your attitudes and your outlook. If that's a bona fide, a sincere, real requirement in order to do a good job, then they can refuse it on that grounds. But then the question becomes, is this a real bona fide, sincere, good faith reason for excluding her?
Well, we just saw the photograph, by the way, of the man who's been writing these emails. And if you saw him, why would anyone want to work for him?
This is why he's hiring tour guides, because he's not doing it himself, maybe. Maybe this is why he needs to hire tour guides.
I don't believe his eyes are that blue either. I think that's... Yeah, the whole thing's... It's a self-evident truth, I believe, that they would not have treated, say, a Muslim in such a way, because there would have been a number of repercussions, which would have been possibly violent and ideological. They're bullying this young woman. I just believe that this story is only just beginning, and I don't believe that spasms will be the answer. I think we have to think about this, and you know what? We have to make all sorts of people uncomfortable with the decision. It's not going to be everyone feeling comfortable, because it's impossible. A lot of people will feel they're not being satisfied, but we'll talk about this tomorrow as well. Hey, as always, my friend, a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.